Okay, so again, if you guys can all just close your computers, have a pen or a pencil out so that you're ready to go. So on the front page, you have just like your breakdown of like setting, etc. Time period is the 14th century, so like the 1500s. Guys, if you can close your computers for me, thank you. We have the Montagues, the Capulets, and then the other citizens of Verona. So I have them up on the whiteboard. I will kind of like pull them out as they're in a scene and then take them back out when they're not in a scene, just to kind of help you visualize like who's in the scene and who's not in the scene, because sometimes it can get a little bit complicated. So this takes place mostly in Verona, a little bit in Mantua, which is also in northern Italy. These are actual actual cities in Italy, but this is not necessarily a true story. So, okay. So if you go to the first page, 1037, you'll see the prologue. The prologue is basically an introduction to the play. So it's one character or one actor who serves kind of as the narrator. He enters from the back of the stage. He introduces and explains the theme of the play, kind of hooks the audience's interest, gets them like ready to pay attention to the play. So it's basically just a preview. In this one, the narrator is going to explain that the play will be about a feud between two families, the Capulets and the Montagues, and then he tells us that the feud will end in tragedy. So we'll listen to it, then we'll talk about it, and then we'll move on.
The Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, William Shakespeare. The prologue.
Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage. The which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend.
Okay, so you get kind of an idea of how Shakespeare writes. It's almost like a poetic kind of type of writing. And you see that you have all these footnotes along the side, right? Annotations, and then there will be footnotes as well. Please make sure you read those. They're going to help you so much, okay? So for example, it says in lines 3 through 4, where it goes from ancient to unclean, it says, a new outbreak of fighting between the families has caused the citizens of Verona to have one another's blood on their hands, okay? So it's going to kind of give you some hints as to what it's talking about. Okay, so this is like I said, this introduction, right? Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. It's basically just laying it out for us, right? We've got two families. They have the same social standing. They're alike in dignity, right? So it's not like one is like noble and the other is like impoverished. They have the same social standing. They're like literally the families are exactly the same. But for some reason they have this grudge, right? They just hate each other. And it's like spilling out into continued violence. So it's not like, oh, I hate those people, but like they aren't doing anything about it. Like they're constantly fighting with each other and causing violence in their city. Okay. Then in line 5, we have from forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. So when it says from forth the fatal loins of these two foes, it's talking about the children of Montague and Capulet. Okay. And then it says a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. So if we look at the note, it says that star-crossed means doomed, okay? Basically, it means that the position that the stars were in when these people were born was unfavorable. In Shakespearean times, they really believed in astrology and that like what stars you were born under had an effect on your life. Some people still believe in stuff like that, but like it was a very wide held belief. So what do we know is going to happen to these two children? They're going to die, right? They're going to take their own lives, right? It says a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. And it's Romeo and Juliet, but we haven't like been given their names yet. So you might be kind of thinking like, why is he telling us this at the very beginning, right? Why is he telling us the end of the play? Couple of reasons. For one, this play is based on a poem that at this time period, everybody would have known this story. So like the poem. So everyone would have already known anyway. And then for us, in a modern audience, it adds to that dramatic irony that we talked about, where we're going to know the whole time that it's going to end really, really badly, okay? But they're going through all of this and making all of these mistakes, and it adds to the suspense and the tension for us because we're like, don't do that, that's the wrong thing to do, but they keep doing it, and so on, okay? So from the beginning, we know how it's going to end, which is in tragedy. But the rest of the prologue basically says like their deaths will end, their parents fight, and then like we're gonna spend the next 2 hours showing you everything that we didn't mention in the prologue, right? Explaining everything else. So it's just like this little introduction. So yes, we already know how it's going to end, but that adds to that dramatic irony that we've been talking about. Any questions on the prologue? Okay, so let's go into Act 1. So plays are divided into acts, and they kind of correspond to like the parts of the plot diagram, right? So Act 1 is kind of like the exposition, Act 2, rising action, Act 3, climax, Act 4, falling action, Act 5, resolution, more or less, okay? So this is going to be kind of exposition, meeting some characters, figuring out what's been going on. Acts are divided then into scenes, okay? So a scene takes place in the same setting. So the setting will always be listed at the top, okay? It says a public square in Verona. And for that whole scene, it's taking place there, okay? People will come in and out of the scene, but that's where we are. You'll see in the brackets, like where it says enter Samson and Gregory, servants of the house of Capulet, okay, that's going to tell you who's coming in and out of the scene. And then just like when we read Sorry, Right Number, you have the characters' names and then what they say. Okay, so Act 1, Scene 1 starts with two young Capulet servants, Samson and Gregory. Okay, they're swaggering across the stage, joking and bragging. When they happen to meet servants from the house of Montague, their rivals, a quarrel begins that grows into an ugly street fight. So, as we listen, I don't want you to get hung up on understanding absolutely every single word that is said. That's not necessarily essential, right? We're looking more for like the broad meaning of what's going on, understanding the general like thrust of the plot, and then also like kind of looking for those figurative language pieces that we've been talking about, but you don't necessarily have to like, every single line isn't necessarily going to be important, okay? I will stop it at several points and kind of like talk about, okay, what just happened? What's going on? We'll talk about study guide questions when they come up. So I'm not gonna just like let you drown and be confused, okay? So when we start, Samson and Gregory are coming out. They're just like, I don't know, they're just two guys, right? And they're just walking along like just talking about how great and macho they are. So they're just kind of like bragging to one another, okay? All right.
1. Scene 1. A public square in Verona.
Gregory, on my word, will not carry coals.
No, for then we should be colliers.
I mean, and we be in collar, we'll draw.
Aye, while you live, draw your neck out of collar.
I strike quickly, being moved.
But thou art not quickly moved to strike.
A dog of the house of Montague moves me.
To move is to stir, and to be valiant is to stand. Therefore, if thou art moved, thou runnest away.
A dog of that house shall move me to stand. I will take the wall of any man or maid of Montague's.
That shows thee a weak slave, for the weakest goes to the wall.
'Tis true, and therefore, women being the weaker vessels are ever thrust to the wall. Therefore, push I will Montague's men from the wall, and thrust his maids to the
The
wall.
quarrel is between our masters and us, their men.
'Tis all one. I will show myself a tyrant. When I have fought with the men, I will be cruel with the maids. I will cut off their heads.
The heads of the maids.
Aye, the heads of the maids, or their maiden heads. Take it in what sense thou wilt.
They must take it and sense that feeling.
Me they shall feel while I am able to stand. It is known I am a pretty piece of flesh.
'Tis well thou art not fish. If thou hadst been poor John. Draw thy tool. Here comes two of the house of Montagues.
Okay, so we've got these two guys, and you might be like, I have absolutely no idea what's going on. That's okay. They're just walking around, they're just like bragging about how awesome they are and how like tough they are. Okay, at the very top, they're making a pun, right? I mean, and we be in collar, will draw, I while you live, draw your neck out of collar. Okay, like it's not super important that you understand what's going on there, but they're just like joking around, right? They're just like walking down the street, talking to each other, joking around. And then Samson is sort of talking about how much he hates the Montagues, right? He says in line 10, I will take the wall of any man or maid of Montagues. And if you look, it says that means to walk nearest to the wall. People of higher rank had the privilege of walking closer to the wall to avoid any water or garbage in the street. So he's saying like, that he thinks that he's better than the Montagues, right? Because even though they're the same rank, right? They're the same social standing, he's like, I would walk against the wall and make them walk in the trash because I'm so much better than them, okay? We also see Samson talking about how he would be cruel with the maids, right? So like with the women of the house of Montague. What kind of person does this kind of make us think that Samson might be? Yeah, just kind of like aggressive, right? Like kind of looking for a fight. Gregory's kind of like, it's just like the fights between us, like our masters and the men, and you're like talking about being cruel to the women too, like, okay, so Samson is definitely the more aggressive of the two. So they're walking along and he's talking about how if he sees a Montague, he will like, strike or whatever. And then here come Abram and Balthazar, and they are two Montagues, okay? So they're gonna come in, and Samson and Gregory are going to try to kind of like bait them into a fight. Okay, so they're gonna try to start a fight.
My naked weapon is out. Quarrel, I will back thee.
How? Turn thy back and run?
Fear me not.
No, Mary, I fear thee.
Let us take the law of our sides. Let them begin.
I will frown as I pass by. Let them take it as they list.
Nay, as they dare. I will bite my thumb at them, which is disgrace to them if they bear it.
Do you bite your thumb at us, sir?
I do bite my thumb, sir.
Do you bite your thumb at us, sir?
Is the law of our side if I say A?
No.
No, sir, I do not bite my thumb at you, sir, but I bite my thumb, sir.
Do you quarrel, sir? Quarrel, sir? No, sir.
But if you do, sir, I am for you. I serve as good a man as you.
No better?
Well, sir,
Say better, here comes one of my master's kinsmen.
yes, better, sir.
You lie.
Draw if you be men. Gregory, remember thy slashing blow.
Okay, so they come into contact with each other. Samson, for all of his like boasting, in line 34, he says, "Let us take a law of our sides, let them begin." So even though he's been talking about like, oh, I'll do anything to the Montagues, blah, blah, blah. But then when it actually comes time to like confront them, he's like, let's let them start the fight, right? Because then we won't get in trouble. Like, we didn't start it if we're not the first ones to pull out our swords and start fighting, okay? So instead, as they walk past, Samson bites his thumb at them. So your first question on your study guide is, in Shakespearean times, biting your thumb was a gesture of friendship, an insult, or a way of hitting on someone. What do we think? An insult, okay? Essentially, it would be like flipping them off today, okay? So number one is B, you can just circle it, okay? It's an insult. So instead of just going and confronting them and fighting with them, he's gonna like basically flip them off and hope that they'll get angry and they'll start fighting him. Okay, so then you have this interaction here, right, where Abram says, "Are you biting your thumb at us?" And Samson's like, "Well, I'm biting my thumb." And then Abram says, "Right, are you doing it to us?" And Samson is like, he says, "Is the law of our side if I say A?" So he's like, if I say that I am, will we get in trouble? Like, or is that legal? And Gregory says no. So then Samson says, "No, I'm not biting my thumb at you. But I am biting my thumb." Right? So he's kind of being like sarcastic here. Like, if somebody was like, "Are you flipping me off?" And you're like, no, I'm just standing here with my middle finger up, right? Like, he's being purposely sarcastic and like, ridiculous, saying he's not starting a fight when he's clearly trying to start a fight. And you see how they like keep saying like, "No, sir, you, sir," right? They're like trying to be very like, they're like over exaggerating, being polite. And then Samson says, "I serve as good a man as you." Abram says, "No better," right? So he's saying again, yep, you're right, they're equals. And then Gregory says, "Say better. Here comes one of my master's kinsmen." So Gregory sees that another Capulet is coming to kind of back them up in the fight, and he's like, "No, yeah, say the Capulets are better. Say we're better," right? And so Samson says, "Yes, better, sir." And then Abram now is mad because Samson has just disrespected his house, right? So Abram says, "You lie." Samson says, "Draw if you be men." They all draw their swords out and they start fighting, okay? In this next section, we're gonna see two characters that are gonna be pretty important. Benvolio and Tybalt come in. When you have like an important character come in, the first time that they speak is going to tell you a lot about their character. So pay attention to the first things that Benvolio and Tybalt say, and then we will talk about what kind of person they might be based on that. Benvolio is a Montague. Yep, enter Benvolio, nephew of Montague and first cousin of Romeo. So that's your second question. Benvolio is a Montague. Okay, and I haven't like tried to color code them, so Montagues are purple and Capulets are red. Okay, let's hear what they have to say.
Heart, fool! Put up your swords, you know not what you do.
What? Art thou drawn among these heartless hinds? Turn thee, Benvolio, look upon thy death.
I do but keep the peace. Put up thy sword, or manage it to part these men with me.
What? Drawn and talk of peace? I hate the word as I hate hell, all Montagues and thee. Have at thee, coward.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop it again there. Okay, so the first thing that Benvolio says is, "Part, fools, put up your swords, you know not what you do." What kind of a person can we assume that Benvolio is based on this? Okay. Doesn't want to fight. So we could say that he's like peaceful. Okay, calm. Right? He's trying to like keep the peace. Okay. And it's up to you. Like I would probably, if I were you, like kind of write in the margin, like calm, peaceful, keeping the peace, right? To just kind of remind you of who that character is. You could also do that on the front page if you would rather have it like where the list of characters are, but something to kind of remind you that that's what his character is, because as we read, like he'll continue to play this kind of like peacekeeping role kind of throughout the play. What about Tybalt? Tybalt comes in and says, "What? Art thou drawn among these heartless hinds? Turn thee, Benvolio, look upon thy death."
He doesn't really care for any of the news and emotions at all.
Mm-hmm.
He's very aggressive.
Definitely. Tybalt's very aggressive. It says in your stage directions, enter Tybalt, hot-headed nephew of Lady Capulet. So if you're like a hothead, it means that like you have like no patience. You're always ready to fight. Okay. So Tybalt comes in and Benvolio has his sword out because he's trying to get them to stop fighting. But he assumes Benvolio is part of the fight. So that's why he says, "What art thou drawn?" He means that your sword is drawn. Okay, so then he's challenging Benvolio. Benvolio says, "I'm just trying to keep the peace. Put up your sword." And then Tybalt says, "What drawn and talk of peace?" Okay, so he sees Benvolio's sword out, and then he's basically just lost it, right? He won't hear anything from Benvolio. They're just gonna fight. Okay, and then you see in the stage directions, it says, enter several of both houses who join the fray, then enter citizens and peace officers with clubs. So if you've ever seen like a baseball game where like two guys start fighting and the whole bench, like all the benches clear and all these people come running, that's like what's happening here, right? It's just this fight between these 6 people, but like everybody's gonna come and be like, what's going on, and start joining in on the fight. Okay? And then the peace officers would be like police, basically trying to like keep them from fighting.
Spears and partisans, strike, beat them down. Down with the populace. Down with the populace.
Those who say, "Give me my own sword." Oh,
A crutch. Why call you for a sword?
my sword, I say. Old Montague is come and flourishes his blade in spite of me.
Thou villain Capulet, hold me not, let me go.
Thou shalt not stir 1 foot to see the foe.
Rebellious subjects, enemies to peace, profaners of this neighbor's stained steel, will they not hear? What? Ho! You men! You beasts! That quench the fire of your pernicious rage with purple fountains issuing from your veins. On pain of torture, from those bloody hands, throw your mistempered weapons to the ground and hear the sentence of your moved prince. 3 civil brawls, bred of an airy word by thee, old Capulet, and Montague, have thrice disturbed the quiet of our streets, and made Verona's ancient citizens cast by their grave beseeming ornaments to wield old partisans, in hands as old, cankered with peace, to part your cankered hate. If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. For this time all the rest depart away. You, Capulet, shall go along with me, and Montague, come you this afternoon, to know our farther pleasure in this case, to old Freetown, our common judgment place. Once more, on pain of death, all men depart.
Okay, so Lord and Lady Capulet come in, and Lord Capulet's like, "Get me my sword!" And Lady Capulet's like, "You need a cane, not a sword, right? Like you're too old to fight. Stop this." Right? She says a crutch. Okay, so that would be like a cane, basically. Same thing with Lord and Lady Montague. Lord Montague's ready to fight, and Lady Montague's like, "You shall not stir a foot to seek a foe." She's like, "No, you're not fighting. You're old. Stop." Okay, and then Prince Escalus comes in to break everything up. So Prince Escalus is obviously the Prince of Verona, so he's in charge. And he tells us that this fight has been going on for quite some time. How many of these big big like street fights have happened?
3.
3. Okay. So number 3, there's been 3 fights. Okay, and they're like, I mean, these aren't just like little fights. These are like brawls, right? Like everybody's in the street fighting each other. And what does he say? He's done. Like he's over this. So he says, if it happens again, what's going to happen?
We're gonna get killed.
Good. So in the very bottom of the page, he says, if ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. So he's basically saying, whoever starts the next fight, like if I find somebody fighting in these streets, that person's going to be killed. Like they're going to be put to death. I'm tired of this. You have to stop. Okay, so his ultimatum is the next person to fight will pay with their life. Okay. So he's tired of it. They're fighting about nothing, right? He says in line 82, 3 civil brawls bred of an airy word by thee, old Capulet and Montague, right? He's saying like, you're not fighting over anything. You're just like, an airy word means like, it's just nothing, right? So you have to stop fighting. And this will become important. So that is number 3. So he tells them, all men depart. So everyone's going to leave except for Montague, Lady Montague, and Benvolio. Everyone else is going to go away. Montague and his wife and Benvolio are going to talk about Romeo, who we haven't met yet, and why he isn't at the fight. Why wasn't he at the fight, and where is he? What's been going on with him?
Who set this ancient quarrel in reverse? Speak, nephew, were you by when it began? Here were the servants of your adversary and yours, close fighting ere I would approach. I drew to part them. In the instant came the fiery Tybalt with his sword prepared, which as he breathed defiance to my ears, he swung about his head and cut the winds, who, nothing hurt withal, kissed him in scorn. While we were interchanging thrusts and blows, came more and more, and fought on part and part, till the prince came, who parted either part.
But where is Romeo? Saw you him today. Right glad I am he was not at this friend.
Madam, an hour before the worshipped sun peered forth the golden window of the east, a troubled mind drave me to walk abroad, where, underneath the grove of sycamore that westward rooted from the city's side, so early walking did I see your son. Towards him I made, but he was ware of me, and stole into the covert of the wood. I, measuring his affections by my own, which then most sought where most might not be found, being one too many by my weary self, pursued my humor, not pursuing his, and gladly shunned who gladly fled from me. Many a morning hath he there been seen, with tears augmenting the fresh morning's dew, adding to clouds more clouds with his deep sighs. But all so soon as the all-cheering sun should in the farthest east begin to draw the shady curtains from Aurora's bed, away from light steals home my heavy son, and private in his chamber pens himself, shuts up his windows, locks fair daylight out, and makes himself an artificial night. Lacking portentous must this human prove, unless good counsel may the cause remove. My noble uncle, do you know of the cause? I neither know it, nor can learn of it. Have you importuned him by any means? Both by myself and many other friends. But he, his own affections counselor is to himself. I will not say how true, but to himself so secret and so close, so far from sounding and discovery, as is the bud bit with an envious worm, ere he can spread his sweet leaves to the air, or dedicate his beauty to the sun. Could we but learn from whence his sorrows grow, he would as willingly give cure as know.
Okay. So in lines 99 to 108, Benvolio is just kind of going over what happened in the fight, okay? And then Lady Montague says, where's Romeo? Have you seen him? I'm really glad he wasn't at this fight. And Benvolio has seen him, right? He says, Madam, an hour before the worship sun peered forth the golden window of the east. Okay, that's early morning, right? An hour before the sun rises. A troubled mind drave me to walk abroad. Okay, so he's like, I just had stuff on my mind, so I just went out walking. Where underneath the grove of sycamore that westward rooteth from the city side, so early walking did I see your son. So he says, Romeo was also out walking before sunrise. Towards him I made, but he was ware of me and stole into the covert of the wood. So Benvolio says, I was walking towards him. He saw me and he like ducked into the trees and kind of ran away. Okay, so he says, I, measuring his affections by my own, pursued my humor, not pursuing his, and gladly shunned who gladly fled from me. So he's like, I was kind of in a bad mood. He obviously didn't want to talk to me. I wasn't going to run after him. Okay. And then Montague tells us, many a morning hath he there been seen with tears augmenting the fresh morning's dew, adding to the clouds more clouds with his deep sighs. So how's Romeo been feeling lately? Very sad, right? Like he's been out like in the morning time before the sun rises, kind of like moping about. And then when he comes home, okay, he says, private in his chamber, pens himself, shuts up his window, locks fair daylight out. So like he comes home and just like closes all the doors, shuts all the blinds, right? So number 4, how has Romeo been spending his days recently? B, locked in his room being moody. Okay. Do we know why yet? No. Okay, so Benvolio, before we go on, at the bottom of page 1042, line 129, the shady curtains from Aurora's bed, that is an allusion, my friends, an allusion to Roman mythology, because Aurora is the goddess of the dawn, okay? So I would probably underline Aurora and write allusion, because then when we ask you, hey, where was there an allusion in scene 1, you'll be like, right there, okay? Okay, yeah, so Benvolio says, do you know the cause? Montague says, nope, and he won't tell me. Benvolio is like, have you tried to find out from other people? And Montague says, yes. He's been trying, asking other people to try, but Romeo is just keeping to himself. What? The dawn, like the sunrise. Okay, so Romeo's going to come in. He's walking lost in thought, as it says. Benvolio is going to say, I will find out what is wrong with him. And Montague and Lady Montague are going to leave, and Benvolio and Romeo are going to talk. I'm going to try to get to the bottom of what is going on with Romeo.
See where he comes. So please you step aside. I'll know his grievance or be much denied.
I would thou wert so happy by thy stay to hear the true trip. Come, madam, let's away.
Good morrow, cousin.
Is the day so young?
But news struck 9.
Ay me, sad hours seem long. Was that my father that went hence so fast?
It was. What sadness lengthens Romeo's hours?
Not having that which having makes them short. In love, out
of love.
Out of her favor where I am in love.
Alas, that love so gentle in his view should be so tyrannous and rough in proof.
Alas, that love, whose view is muffled still, should without eyes see pathways to his will. Where shall we dine? Oh me, what fray was here? Yet tell me not, for I have heard it all. There's much to do with hate, but more with love. Why then, oh brawling love, oh loving hate, oh anything of nothing first create, oh heavy lightness, serious vanity, misshapen chaos of well-seeming forms, feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, still waking sleep that is not what it is. This love feel I, that feel no love in this. Dost thou not laugh?
No, cause I'd rather weep.
Good heart, at what?
At thy good heart's oppression.
Okay, so let's stop there. Okay, so like we said, the first few lines that a character says tells us a lot about their character. Romeo his first line, Benvolio says, "Good morning, cousin." And Romeo says, "Is the day so young?" Benvolio says, "But new struck 9." And Romeo says, "Ay me, sad hours seem long." So what kind of person does Romeo seem to be? Super emotional. Oh my gosh, Romeo is so emotional all the time. Okay. Also, I would say a little on the dramatic side, right? Like if someone says to you, "Good morning," and you're like, "Ugh, it's only morning," right? Like you're just like being a little bit on the dramatic side. So we will see that continue with Romeo throughout the play, okay? So Benvolio says in line 156, "What sadness lengthens Romeo's hours?" And Romeo says, "Not having that which makes them short." Benvolio says, "In love." Romeo says, "Out." Benvolio says, "Of love." Romeo says, "Out of her favor where I am in love." So what is going on with Romeo? Why is he so upset?
The person that he likes to start off in.
Good. Okay, so Romeo's in love with someone. It's not Juliet. Okay. Romeo's in love with someone and that person doesn't love him back. Okay, and so that is the reason that he's being so mopey and so sad and so dramatic. Okay. And one thing to kind of know about this time period, right, the 1500s, it wasn't like today. It's not like, you like go on dates or you like Snapchat each other or whatever. Like dating wasn't really a thing. Like if you wanted to marry someone, you went to their parents and you presented your reasons and your like suit to marry, and you entered into more of like a financial arrangement, right? Like if you were going to marry a woman, her parents would give you a dowry, right? And then you would like provide for her. It just wasn't like, I don't know, it wasn't like the dating that we think of today, right? You would very rarely probably have opportunities to even be alone with someone of the opposite sex, much less like have any dating. So that like Romeo's probably like seen this girl a couple of times, and like that's how he's decided he's in love with her, right? And she won't return, right, any of that. So they would maybe like send each other gifts. Like maybe he sent her, like a necklace or something and she returned it, or he wrote her a letter and she didn't write him back. Like there was not the same kind of dating that we would assume, okay? For the top of page 1044, Romeo has this little speech that he gives here. He says, "Oh, brawling love, oh, loving hate, oh, anything of nothing first create, oh, heavy lightness, serious vanity." These are a type of literary device. What literary device is it? Not personification. Not a soliloquy. What do we notice about these things? Heavy, lightness, loving, hate. Yeah, Rachel? Not a metaphor. If you love someone, how could you hate them? If you hate them, how could you love them? What do we notice about these pairs of words? They're opposites, right? So what do we call it in English class speak? When we have opposites, contradictory phrases. Oxymoron, okay? So I would put like a big old, arrow. These are oxymorons. Okay, Romeo's confused and upset. So he's using these oxymorons, right? Heavy, lightness. If something's heavy, how is it light? If it's light, how is it heavy? If you're in love, how are you hating, right? They're opposites. Okay. So Romeo, very upset, as we have learned. Benvolio is going to continue to try to find out more, and Romeo is going to kind of continue on with being dramatic. For number 5 on your study guide, you have Romeo's heartsick. What does his attitude tell us about his character? Yeah, basically exactly what we said here about him. Same thing still applies, okay? Okay.
Why such is love's transgression? Griefs of mine own lie heavy in my breast, which thou wilt propagate, to have it pressed with more of thine. This love that thou hast shown doth add more grief to too much of mine own. Love is a smoke raised with the fume of sighs, being purged of fire sparkling in lovers' eyes, being vexed to see nourished with lovers' tears. What is it else? Of madness most discreet, a choking gall and preserving sweet. Farewell, my cousin.
Soft, I will go alone, and if you leave me so, you do me wrong.
Tut, I have lost myself, I am not here. This is not Romeo, he's some other where.
Tell me in sadness, who is that you love?
What, shall I groan and tell thee?
Groan, why no, but sadly tell me who.
Bid a sick man in sadness make his will. Ah, word ill urged to one that is so ill. In sadness, cousin, I do love a woman.
I aimed so near when I supposed you loved.
A right good marksman, and she's fair I love.
All right, fair mark, fair cuz, as soon as hit.
Well, in that hit you miss. She'll not be hit with Cupid's arrow. She hath Dian's wit, and in strong proof of chastity well armed, from love's weak childish bow she lives unharmed. She will not stay the siege of loving terms, nor bide the encounter of assailing eyes, nor ope her lap to saints seducing gold. Oh, she is rich in beauty, only poor that when she dies, with beauty dies her store.
Then she hath sworn that she will still live chaste.
She hath, and in that sparing makes huge waste. For beauty, starved with her severity, cuts beauty off from all posterity. She is too fair, too wise, wisely too fair to merit bliss by making me despair. She hath forsworn to love, and in that vow do I live dead that live to tell it now.
Okay, so there's a lot going on in this little section. Benvolio's trying to get Romeo to tell him who it is. Like, who are you in love with? And again, going back to this idea that Romeo is pretty dramatic, he doesn't just come out and tell him, right? He's like, oh, you're like making me, my heart hurt by even having to mention her name, right? Like, he's very dramatic. And so, and like, even then when he finally says, like, in sadness, cousin, I do love a woman. And Benvolio's like, yeah, I figured that much, but like, who is it, right? And he won't tell him. So at the bottom of this page, we start to see some more allusions. Romeo says, shall not be hit with Cupid's arrow. Okay, so Cupid is the Roman god of love, right? Saying like the same Cupid that we have on Valentine's Day, right, in our culture today. So if he's saying she'll not be hit by Cupid's arrow, he's saying that like she won't fall in love, right? Then he says she hath Dian's wit. So Diana is the Roman goddess of chastity. Chastity is like purity, innocence. And so he's comparing her to Diana by saying that she is also virtuous and chaste. Okay, so like also pure. At the top of page 1046, you see sort of like she will not stay the siege of loving terms, nor bide the encounter of assailing eyes, nor ope her lap to saint seducing gold. So he's saying like, she's not being swayed by me saying that I love her. She's not being swayed by me like looking lovingly at her, or even like my wealth, but like she's not seduced by any of that. And then Benvolio says, then she hath sworn that she will still live chaste. So what he means here is that this girl, whoever it is that Romeo is in love with, has sworn that she's going to become a nun. Okay, so nuns take a vow of chastity. They never marry. They don't have boyfriends, right? Nothing. They like live pure and they like dedicate themselves to like God and like, you know, prayer and things like that. Okay, so whoever this girl is, she's sworn that she's going to become a nun. Okay, so that's really the reason why she's like not open to anything of Romeo's, because she's decided that she's going to do this, and nuns don't participate in any of those things. Okay, so that's number 6. Why doesn't this girl like Romeo? She has sworn to become a nun. Okay, and nuns aren't allowed to have husbands. Okay. Benvolio is going to give Romeo some advice here. So as you listen, think about what the advice is, and we'll talk about it after we're done listening.
Be ruled by me, forget to think of her.
Oh, teach me how I should forget to think.
By giving liberty unto thine eyes, examine other beauties.
'Tis the way to call hers exquisite and question more. These happy masks that kiss fair ladies' brows, being black puts us in mind they hide the fair. He that is stricken blind cannot forget the precious treasure of his eyesight lost. Show me a mistress that is passing fair. What doth her beauty serve but as a note where I may read who passed that passing fair? Farewell, thou canst not teach me to forget.
I'll pay that doctrine or else die in debt.
Okay, so what's Benvolio's advice? What should Romeo do? Just forget about her, right? Find someone else. In line 220, he says, by giving liberty unto thine eyes, examine other beauties. Okay, so Benvolio's advice is just to look at other girls. There's other beautiful women in Verona. You don't need to be hung up on this girl, okay? So that's number 7. And of course, Romeo, in his typical dramatic nature, is going to be like, no one will ever be as beautiful as her, right? So Romeo is like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to do that. Okay. And that's basically the end of the scene. Exeunt means that they exit the stage. Okay, so that is the end of scene 1. Any questions so far? Okay, so something that I think is really helpful on your study guides is to write like a 1 to 2 sentence summary of what happened in that scene, so that then when we're going back and reviewing, you can remind yourself like, oh yeah, that happened there, this happened there. So we'll write this first one together. Is everybody okay if I erase these? So when you're writing a summary, just like when we do like article of the week or anything else, we're focusing only on the very most important things. So like every single detail is not going to be necessary. So what are some of the important things that happen in this scene? Okay, good. So Capulet, Montague's fight. Okay. What else? Okay. Okay, Romeo is sad because the person he loves does not love him back. What happens in between these two that might be important?
The prince gives the ultimatum.
Good. Prince Aeschylus gives an ultimatum not to fight. Okay. I mean, that's pretty much it, right? Like, you could say something about Benvolio encourages him to look at other girls, but honestly, this is like the most important parts of the scene going forward. Okay. Okay, so I don't want us to get too far ahead of the other classes. There's about 10-ish minutes left, so you should use that time. If your essay's not turned in, keep working on it. If you've got other missing assignments, work on those. But we will start scene 2 on Monday, okay, next time we have class.